I spent my whole life feeling like I was second best because of my sister, the so-called golden child. But on my wedding day, I finally got the sweet taste of revenge. Yeah, all my life, I had to deal with being treated unfairly just because my sister was their favorite. She even tried to steal the spotlight and walk down the aisle at my own wedding. But that was the day I finally got back at her. My parents always had a soft spot for her, and they didn't exactly try to hide it. If she blamed me for something, they'd believe her right away and punish me on the spot. But when I called her out, no matter how clear the proof was, they'd go easy on her, then somehow twist it around and scold me too. Every year, my birthday cake had to be her favorite flavor, even though my parents knew I couldn't stand it. They acted like they forgot. She always got more than me, more gifts, more attention, more say in where we went. Even when it was supposed to be my special day, it was always about her. She grew up spoiled rotten and used me like I was her personal punching bag. At first, she mostly acted like I didn't exist. But things got a lot worse when we became teenagers. She didn't have many friends, maybe because people moved away or maybe because she was just plain mean, I really don't know. We were never close enough for me to find out. My parents loved to brag about how great she was, always skipping over the not-so-great parts. Meanwhile, they'd pick apart everything I did wrong like it was some sort of running joke. The only reason I even knew she had no friends was because we went to the same school, and I started noticing she was always by herself. Now, I wasn't exactly a social butterfly, but I got along with people. I was pretty popular. And once my sister realized that, she went from ignoring me to trying to drag me down whenever she could. She'd start making stuff up about me and my friends, trying to get me in trouble. Eventually, my parents started saying I couldn't hang out with anyone. They'd throw out excuses like, "Your sister says they're a bad influence," or, "Why can't you be more like your sister and enjoy being with family?" If it hadn't been for my extended family, I probably would have gone completely nuts. Most of them lived in the same town, and I got along really well with my cousins, even the ones who were a little older or younger than me. One time at a family gathering, my cousins invited me to do something with them. I can't even remember what it was now, but I just said, "I'm not allowed to go anywhere." When they asked why, I just blurted out the truth, like a typical kid, "I'm not allowed to have friends because my sister doesn't have any." Apparently, that comment got around to the adults, and later on, my parents got chewed out by the rest of the family. They grounded me for a month and called me a liar, but honestly, it was worth it. After that, they gave me a little more freedom. Soon after, my sister switched schools. I guess she couldn't stand that our relatives knew about her lack of friends, so she begged to transfer. My parents didn't even hesitate, even though the new school was farther away and cost more. She made friends at the new place, but she never went back to ignoring me. She was mad that I'd embarrassed her in front of the family and realized she could screw with my life whenever she wanted. She never stopped after that. Her new friends would come over and bully me, but to my parents, that was just harmless teasing. I stopped inviting anyone to the house because my parents were terrible hosts, or my sister would accuse them of stealing, and, of course, my parents would believe her. At least I had my cousins. My parents never dared to treat other family members the way they treated me. Then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him around, but my parents insisted. At one point during a visit, we got separated, and he found me to tell me that my sister had been flirting with him. She showed up wearing barely anything, fluttering her eyelashes and talking trash about me while hyping herself up. He was creeped out and came to warn me. Of course, my sister told a completely different story, that he had made a move on her, but she turned him down because she'd never betray me like that. And guess who my parents believed? Look, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I believed him right away, and yeah, part of it was out of spite. At that point in my life, I was a bitter, angry teenager who was tired of being treated like garbage. I hated my sister as much as she hated me. Now, let's talk about looks for a second. Not that it should matter, but it plays into the story. My parents were both overweight and showed love through food, offering second helpings, buying treats, that sort of thing. My sister took after them and was overweight too. I was always skinny, partly because punishments in my house usually meant no snacks or sweets. But personality matters way more than appearance. My sister was rude, entitled, and never had to earn anything. She just demanded and got what she wanted. Even her attempts to flirt were cringy because she didn't know how to actually win someone over. And look, even with all my teenage insecurity, I never once believed my boyfriend would cheat on me with her. She wasn't exactly some irresistible beauty. After that, my parents banned me from dating him. I tried to keep the relationship going in secret, but it was just too hard. It didn't last. I ended up dating someone else later on, but surprise, my sister pulled the same move. She hit on him, he turned her down, and she claimed he had come on to her. Again, my parents sided with her. I tried pointing out the pattern, but they just decided I had terrible taste in guys and couldn't be trusted. They used those incidents as proof that I had bad judgment. That relationship didn't last either. It turned into some Romeo and Juliet mess and fizzled out. Eventually, I got labeled a slut in school, not because I slept around, but because I was okay with kissing boys but wouldn't date anyone seriously. Thankfully, that gossip never reached my sister or my parents. At some point during all this, my sister did bring home a boyfriend. He was treated like royalty. My parents were obsessed with him and constantly told me, "Why can't you find someone like your sister did?" Then, out of nowhere, he stopped coming around. Suddenly, he went from being perfect to being a lying jerk who fooled my sister. And just like that, life went back to how it always was. She got more spending money than me. Her curfews were better. She could go wherever she wanted, whenever she wanted, and I was stuck at home. When I asked why, they said it was because she was older. But when I reached the same age, I still didn't get the same freedom. When I brought it up, they either denied ever saying that, or claimed I wasn't as trustworthy as she was, pointing to the stuff she said about my friends and boyfriends as proof. Time rolled on, and eventually, it was time for my sister to graduate. She got accepted to college, not a fancy one or anything, and definitely no scholarships. To be honest, I never even knew which colleges my sister applied to. My parents only ever told me about her successes. So I can't say how many rejections she got. But I do know she struggled in school, because whenever she managed to pull off a B, they'd throw a mini celebration. Me? I got good grades pretty consistently. But my parents never made a big deal about it. Their excuse was always something like, "You always get good grades, what's there to celebrate?" Of course, when she got accepted into college, there was a whole parade in her honor. They promised to cover all her expenses. I won't lie, I was relieved she'd be moving out. Not that it gave me much peace. She'd still show up at home every other weekend, and like clockwork, something in my room would go missing or she'd cook up some drama to make my life harder. My curfew stayed strict as ever, no matter how old I got. Eventually, my mom sat me down for the classic graduation talk. I'm only a year younger than my sister, so it was my turn soon. She told me straight up they didn't have the money to pay for my college because they were already funding my sister's. She said it'd be best if I just started working after high school and maybe, they could help me out once my sister finished her degree. Oh, and if I planned on staying at home? I'd need to pay for all my own stuff, plus chip in for rent and bills. I said I could just apply for student loans, and Mom said, "Well, technically yes, but actually no." She claimed they cared so much about me that they'd be the ones to decide which colleges were worth going into debt for. I didn't ask how they planned to stop me. I didn't care enough to argue. They never mentioned scholarships. At that point, they didn't even know what my grades were like, and honestly, they'd stopped believing in me a long time ago. I didn't flinch. I just told her okay. She wasn't expecting that. She kept trying to dig for a reaction, maybe hoping I'd throw a tantrum so they could say, "See? She's too immature for college." But I just thanked them for their honesty, said I understood, and left it at that. My dad tried the same routine a little later, but I stayed calm with him too. The truth is, after everything they'd put me through, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. I figured they'd find some excuse to avoid helping me. I knew they'd make my life harder instead of easier. So I prepared in silence. I'd been working toward college for a while anyway. With how strict they were and how few friends I had, I spent most of my time studying. To me, college was freedom. It was the only real shot I had at building a better life. And when the time came, I gave it everything I had and landed a full scholarship. Nothing Ivy League or some super fancy law or med school, but it was a solid program at a decent college, and it was 100% covered. Knowing how much my sister would hate it, and that she'd try to sabotage it through our parents, I made sure to announce it on social media and tell my parents at the same time. I even forced myself to thank them in the post, just to make it awkward for them to deny me. They couldn't stop me without looking terrible to the family. At first, they even acted a little proud. But it didn't take long before my sister got in their ear. Suddenly, their tone changed. They started asking if I was sure I wanted to go. They hinted that my sister wasn't doing well in college and, since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd probably do even worse. I stood firm. I wasn't backing down. They weren't happy about it, but there wasn't much they could do. College saved me. I finally started to feel happy for once. I kept in touch with my parents, visited on holidays, called here and there, but since they didn't pay for anything, it was easy to say I couldn't afford to come home often. During that time, I never introduced any guy I dated to my family. Eventually, my sister dropped out of college. I know she didn't graduate, because if she had, my parents would have thrown a party and plastered it everywhere. She moved back in with them, didn't pay for rent, didn't cover bills, and when I asked about it, my parents just said, "It's different." She ended up getting a job at the same place as my mom, probably because my mom pulled some strings. They tried to spin it as some kind of proud accomplishment. Anyway, this is where it starts to get good. I met my husband around this time. You know those people who always say, "If it were me, I would have done something"? Yeah, he's the kind of guy who actually does it. Me? I'm the type who freezes in the moment, keeps quiet, and then loses sleep replaying it in my head, wishing I'd spoken up or come up with something clever to say. I cry when I'm angry. But my husband? He claps back immediately. He lives for drama and loves seeing it through to resolution. If he doesn't react right away, that just means he's planning something worse, because he doesn't forgive and forget. He just waits to strike back harder. He's the one who encouraged me to post this story, and even wanted to post it on one of those nuclear revenge forums. But he figured what we did didn't quite qualify as nuclear. People were shocked we ended up together. Just because I wasn't bold like him didn't mean I didn't appreciate that side of him. I loved that he stood up for himself, and for me, in ways I never could. And honestly, he treats people great, just not the ones who treat others like dirt. When we talked about getting married, we didn't care much about the ceremony itself. We were working with a tight budget, and both of us agreed we'd rather spend money on a dream honeymoon in Europe than throw a huge party. Since most of his family was scattered across the country and mine was still clumped together in our hometown, we decided to hold the wedding there. We weren't living far, so we could drive out on weekends to take care of things. We even had enough work flexibility to spend a little extra time in town if needed. We sent out engagement announcements and saved the dates a few months in advance. And that's when, of course, my parents demanded to meet the man I was marrying. I wanted to say no. I really did. But it was hard. Being away from them had made me start to think maybe they weren't as bad as I remembered. When I told my husband I might let them meet him, but only with me around, he looked at me like I'd just canceled Christmas. See, he'd been prepping for this. He even went out and bought a high-quality pocket recorder, ready to secretly tape the whole thing. He was hyped, genuinely excited, to shut down any attempt from my sister to flirt with him, roast her if she tried, and then share the recording with the rest of the family. So, my husband went off to meet my parents and sister all by himself, full of energy and kind of excited for what might happen. When he came back, he was practically bouncing off the walls. Babe, he said, you won't believe the messed up stuff they said. We could wreck them with this. So many angles to work with. I didn't get it at first. I asked to hear the recording, but he told me I should let him explain everything first, said if I heard it cold, I might take it the wrong way. So, here's what went down. Instead of my sister doing her usual flirty nonsense, my parents and sister all sat him down and gave him a little talk. After some passive-aggressive remarks about not liking him and doubting my judgment, they finally got to the point. They told him they were willing to pay for our wedding, but only if my sister walked down the aisle first. Yep, at my wedding. In a wedding dress. In my venue. With people taking pictures. And she'd even get her own cake afterward. Their reasoning? Apparently, it wasn't proper for a younger sister to get married before the older one, so this would give her a chance to experience it, as part of my day. The level of delusion was unbelievable. Now I'll let my husband tell his part. He wrote this next bit. Hey, vengeful husband here. There's no fury quite like the kind that lives inside a guy who reads too many pro-revenge and nuclear karma stories and then sees his wife, yeah, she's my wife now, get treated like crap by her own family. Now, even though she makes me sound like some smooth talker, I'm not gonna lie, when they hit me with that offer, my brain straight up glitched. It was like someone asked me if I wanted mayo on my pancakes. Just, no. Even Troy probably wouldn't have accepted the horse if it looked like this nonsense. Once I recovered, I had a long list of roasts I wanted to drop on them. But then something in me whispered, no. Milk this. So I nodded, acted thoughtful, and said I'd need to check in with my fiancé. Then I got out of there fast so I wouldn't laugh and blow the whole thing. Back to me. When he told me the full story, with that same grin and the recording to prove it, I was in shock. I knew my parents were awful, but I guess being away from them had softened the memory a little. Even I didn't think they'd go that far. Thank God my husband insisted we treat this like a revenge mission, or I might have spiraled into some ugly place emotionally. We had a blast coming up with revenge ideas. Some were way over the top, just for laughs, but a few were kind of doable. Eventually, we called his older brother, who's way more level-headed, and pitched the plan we were leaning toward, stuff like giving them the wrong venue address. His brother wasn't thrilled. He basically said, look, I know you're gonna do something, but some of these could actually get you sued. So, we toned it down and settled on a plan that was still satisfying. We'd pretend to agree, let them think they were winning, and then just hire security to keep my sister out of the ceremony. Of course, if that was the whole plan, it wouldn't be much of a revenge story. The rest? That's mostly my husband's brilliance, but he wanted me to tell it. Just to be clear, everything that happened from this point on, we planned together. He never did anything behind my back. So, he went back to my parents and told them he'd thought it over, and while I probably wouldn't like the idea, he didn't think it was such a big deal. He said he didn't want the family falling apart, so he'd help make it happen. He even played it up like I was emotionally fragile and hated conflict, so if they just sprung it on me during the wedding, I'd probably hold it together for the crowd. But since weddings are intense, who knew? I might lash out. So he offered a compromise. They'd help pay for some wedding stuff, and in return, I'd feel grateful and less likely to cause a scene. Between that and the public setting, I'd stay quiet. According to him, my parents were surprised but didn't argue. And my grown-ass sister? She literally started skipping around the house like a 5-year-old. But the kicker, my husband told them I was the one who didn't trust him. That I had trust issues because of bad past relationships, and I constantly checked his phone to make sure he wasn't cheating. So, in order to keep me calm, he said we couldn't write any of this plan down. No messages, no emails, everything had to be done in person. That's how the months of deception began. While they thought they were pulling one over on me, we were playing them. They weren't paying for the whole wedding, but they offered to pitch in on certain things, and insisted on being part of all the decision-making. They tried to control stuff that mattered to me, like the music, the color palette, the vibe. But my husband would play peacemaker, saying it was better to keep me from freaking out. We didn't care that much about the wedding look anyway, so we let them think they had a say. Now here's where the fun starts. When it came to picking drinks and food, we'd agree to the cheapest or second cheapest option. Then, my husband would take my sister to the venue separately and act disappointed, like, "Yeah, we wanted the fancy stuff, but your parents said no." Oh well. Cue my sister whining and demanding the best menu. Next thing I know, my parents are telling me, "Don't worry, we'll cover the top-tier package." We did the same with the photographer and the flowers. He handed my sister a bouquet of our actual flowers, then sadly mentioned that I wanted some other tacky kind. Of course, she hated the idea of me getting something worse, so she demanded they pay for the good ones. They agreed. Then came the dress. That one was tricky. My parents wanted me to wear this god-awful gown. Okay, maybe it wasn't hideous, but it definitely wasn't my style and would have looked terrible on me. So, my husband went off alone again, super hyped to meet up with them. When he came back, he was practically buzzing. "Babe, you won't believe what they're planning," he said. "We could totally wreck them. So many ways this could go." I was confused and wanted to hear the recording right away, but he told me it'd be better to listen to the story first, said if I heard it out of context, I might get the wrong idea. Turns out, when he showed up, they didn't try to flirt with him or play nice. Nope. My parents and sister sat him down like it was a business meeting. After a few grumbles about how they didn't really approve of him or my judgment, they finally dropped the bomb. They offered to pay for the wedding, but only on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle first. At my wedding. In a wedding dress. At my venue. With photographers. And her own cake. Their logic? It wasn't right for the younger sister to get married before the older one. So this would at least give her the experience, on my day. In my spotlight. Now, here's where my husband wanted to step in and type his part. "Hey again, husband here. Look, I've read a lot of revenge stories. But nothing gets the blood pumping like real-life absurdity." When they dropped that offer, my brain basically rebooted. It was so out there, I wasn't even mad at first, I was impressed. Like, wow, you guys really thought this through and still thought it was okay? Even the Trojans would have turned down this horse. Once my brain got back online, I had a whole arsenal of insults ready to go. But something inside me whispered, "Nah, string them along." So I told them I needed time. Said I'd talk to my fiancée and see how she felt. Then I got the heck out before I started laughing. Back to me. So he tells me all this with a smirk, plays me the recording to back it up, and I'm just sitting there stunned. I thought maybe I'd been too hard on my parents over the years, that maybe they weren't as bad as I remembered. Nope. They were worse. Thankfully, my husband was already on revenge mode, so instead of spiraling into sadness, we turned it into a game. We started tossing around ideas, some of them totally ridiculous, some maybe a little illegal. Eventually, we called his older brother to talk it through. Now, his brother is the responsible one. He gave us a bit of a scolding, not that he thought we'd actually listen, but just to get it on the record. He also pointed out that some of our plans could backfire legally. So we settled on a more subtle approach. We'd act like we agreed to their plan, and then on the day of the wedding, we'd have security turn my sister away. But we weren't stopping there. My husband went back to my parents and said he'd talk to me, and while I wasn't thrilled about it, he didn't see a big problem with the sister walking first thing. He pretended he was trying to avoid drama and keep the family together. He played it like I was super sensitive and didn't like conflict, so the less I knew ahead of time, the better. That way, if it happened as a surprise, I'd probably stay quiet. But since it could go badly, he suggested we just keep everything off the record. He even told them I was really controlling and paranoid from past relationships, that I liked to check his phone and stuff, so it was best not to put any of this in writing. And they bought it. From then on, all communication stayed verbal. We made sure of that. When my sister tried texting him, I'd respond instead. That helped sell the whole idea that I was neurotic and always watching, which made them more cautious. Some people might be upset that their partner was out there talking trash about them, but honestly, I thought it was hilarious. I even encouraged it. My sense of humor's a little messed up. And yes, my sister did try to flirt with him. He pretended to be torn, like he might give in. It helped seal the deal. Meanwhile, we kept the real plan secret, security. And here's the kicker, we ended up having a big, beautiful wedding, even though we originally wanted a small courthouse ceremony so we could spend more on our honeymoon. Thanks to my parents, it was all paid for. We called it compensation for emotional trauma. My husband, who just nodded in confirmation, by the way, got way more joy out of pulling off this con than planning the actual wedding. I didn't even think it was possible to see a guy grinning ear to ear while wasting his Saturday on a road trip to discuss flowers with his in-laws, but there he was. Finally, the big day came. According to the plan, my parents and sister would wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride is supposed to arrive late, my sister would sneak in at just the right moment and walk down the aisle in her dress, assuming I hadn't gotten there yet. By the time I showed up, it had already been done. To help sell it, my husband took a piece of leftover fabric from my real wedding dress and brought it to my parents' house. He told them he'd already started ruining the dress I wanted, then said I was freaking out and he had to calm me down. That was the last time he saw them before the big day. We also made sure the Real security stayed out of sight at first. As guests arrived, all they saw was a nice lady checking names off a list. Once my parents were inside, we brought out the real guy, a massive dude who looked like a straight-up bodyguard. We told him not to let my sister in, and offered a generous tip if he kept things quiet. Then it happened. My parents got a text saying my sister was 5 minutes out. My dad gave a signal to start the ceremony. My bridesmaids were in on it, so they went along and took their places. Then my dad stepped up to walk me in, totally expecting to see my sister. A friend of mine, who wasn't in the bridal party but was part of the plan, texted me to get ready. That way it wouldn't look suspicious if my bridesmaids weren't messaging me. This friend, by the way, loves chaos almost as much as my husband and was thrilled to be part of the mission. The music started. The doors opened. I walked in. My dad froze when he saw me. He kept glancing behind me, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. He couldn't see the entrance from where he stood, so he had no idea why my sister wasn't there. Then his phone rang. It was her. He mumbled something like, something came up, and bailed on me, right there in front of everyone. Gasps filled the room. My friend, on cue, asked loudly, what just happened? I made myself tear up and said, he told me it wasn't supposed to be me. It wasn't just an act. I was hurt. But we had rehearsed this part. My husband and I agreed that if my dad left me hanging, we'd make it look as bad as possible. My friend raised her voice again, asking, what did he mean it wasn't supposed to be you, so everyone could hear? Then she said, I'm going to find out what's going on, and stormed off. She was our distraction, meant to keep the chaos going and block anyone from trying to stop the wedding. My mom left next. That's when my husband's dad rushed forward and took my arm. We'd warned him this might happen. He jogged down the aisle to get me, and I smiled despite everything. Whispers followed us as we walked, people wondering what the heck had just happened. Some guests actually left to check things out, but I didn't care. When I reached my husband, he took my hands and whispered, that performance was Oscar-worthy. Don't worry, I'll handle them. The ceremony went on without a hitch. My parents never came back. During the reception, I saw people coming and going. No one told me what was happening, but I figured something was going down. Someone whispered something in my husband's ear, and he stepped outside. When he came back, he looked furious, but leaned in and said he had to go hide for a minute so he wouldn't blow our cover and start laughing. It had worked. Here's what I found out later, from my husband, our friends, the security guard, and a few family members. My sister had shown up in a wedding dress. The security guard stopped her and told her she must be at the wrong place because there was already a bride inside. We tipped that man very well. My dad tried threatening the guy, saying he didn't know who he was, so he couldn't possibly be working the event. The guard calmly offered to call the cops, since he was hired by us and was just doing his job. Realizing time was running out, my dad tried ordering him to let her in. Right about then, our friend, yeah, the one in on the plan, showed up at the entrance and started yelling at my sister. She was throwing insults, pretending to be confused and outraged, basically just stalling for time. My mom showed up right after, and more people started to gather. At that point, the whole ridiculous plan had completely fallen apart. All my parents could do was try to do damage control, but the people who found out what they tried to pull? Horrified. Folks started shouting, calling them out. And like clockwork, my parents and sister tried to shift the blame onto my husband. When someone called him over, he came walking in cool as ever, wearing the most confused face you've ever seen. He flat out denied everything. Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, he joked later. He acted like the idea was so crazy, he couldn't believe anyone would say he agreed to it. They kept insisting he was in on it, and he just shrugged and said, "Show me proof." Of course, they had nothing. Every message they had from him was just normal wedding planning stuff. Nothing about the sister in a wedding dress nonsense. Meanwhile, my sister? She was scream-crying. Like, full-on meltdown, on the floor, kicking her legs like a toddler. My dad looked like he wanted to hit my husband, but the security guy and a few guests stepped in before it could escalate. They tried to claim they didn't have proof because my husband had told them not to text. He just laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, right?" Then he tore into them, called them out for being awful parents, said their plan was insane, and told them he wasn't about to let them ruin his wedding too. Then he walked away like a boss. Nobody believed them. The venue had cameras, but they told me they could only release footage for security issues. Still, a few guests recorded parts of the drama. Watching my parents and sister get shredded by guests, relatives, and even some of their friends. That was pure catharsis. After years of being accused, dismissed, and disrespected, finally seeing them get a taste of their own medicine. That was one hell of a wedding gift. My mom was crying, my dad looked like he was cycling between rage and panic, and my sister, still flailing on the floor, wailing like a banshee. They kept insisting my husband had agreed to it, but people kept asking the obvious. Why would he agree to this? Why don't you have any proof? Why were you trying to stage this during her wedding? They had no good answers. Eventually, someone told them to leave. My dad had to literally drag my sister off the floor to get her to go. That night, no one said a word to me about what had happened. Maybe they were trying to spare me, or maybe, just for once, they saw me as the bride, not just the background character in my sister's story. Either way, people were extra nice, and super positive about everything. My husband says all the high-end food and drinks probably helped, too. We had a blast. He kept up the angry groom act for a little while, but he broke out laughing and smiling before long. After the party, we hit the hotel to get some sleep before our honeymoon. Side note, my parents had tried to buy our plane tickets, but we turned them down. We figured they'd cancel them out of spite or try something shady. Good call, too. Since the wedding, the three of them have tried to reach out to me. I've ignored their calls, on my husband's advice, so there's a paper trail. And then it happened. My sister messaged me. I won't bother quoting the whole thing. It was all over the place, angry, bitter, and just plain unhinged. She blamed me for humiliating her, called my husband a two-faced snake who tricked them all, he loved that and wants to frame it on the wall, and said she knew he'd cheat on me. Even said he was probably cheating with her. My husband grabbed my phone and took screenshots, calls, texts from her, and a few nasty messages from my parents demanding I answer them. Then he dropped it all in our family group chat. He even added screenshots of messages they'd sent him, calling him names and threatening him. And he kept up the act, "You're delusional." I never agreed to anything. He told them that if they didn't stop, he'd sue for defamation and harassment. Then he sent this long message to the group, asking the rest of the family to step in. Said I was being harassed non-stop and begged them to help keep our honeymoon from being ruined the way they tried to ruin our wedding. He ended the message by asking them not to share our location, just in case my parents decided to send my sister to our honeymoon suite, claiming he had promised to sleep with her or something. Yeah, he added a LOL to that one. Surprisingly, our family had our backs. They said they'd handle it. And you know what? Since then, things have been quiet. My husband's a little disappointed my sister didn't show up again so he could verbally tear her apart, but hey, we'll see if this peace lasts. All in all, while I would have loved to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least this once, they failed to ruin something that mattered to me. And I actually got some revenge out of it too. Oh, before I wrap this up, here's something people always ask me. Why do you think they treated you this way? I've asked myself that forever. When I was a kid, I tried asking them straight out. They'd deny everything, tell me I was ungrateful, and scold me for being dramatic. So I gave up. Over the years, I've thought about it a lot. My best guess? I think I was unplanned. They waited years to have my sister, she was their miracle baby. But then I came along not long after. And based on how close we are in age, I think they didn't expect another child to come so soon, or so easily. Maybe they weren't using protection. Maybe they didn't even realize my mom was pregnant until it was too late. Either way, they were already overwhelmed with a newborn, and then boom, here I came. They weren't well off, so having another kid so soon probably felt like a burden. Maybe they just resented me for existing. That's my theory anyway. But honestly, it doesn't really matter. No reason could ever justify the way they treated me. And did they really think this wedding stunt would work? My husband and I think the whole plan was a bluff. We believe my sister threw a tantrum because I was getting married first, when she can't even get a date. So my parents cooked up this ridiculous idea and pitched it to my husband, expecting him to say no. That way, they'd look like they tried, and still have an excuse not to pay for anything. But he said yes. And once he agreed, they were trapped. They couldn't back out without making my sister angry, and that scared them more than anything. So they went along with it, and the whole thing blew up in their faces.